Do you like villains? Do you like Final Fantasy games? Find out more today on The Absent Friends Show. Hello and welcome to the Absent Friend Show. I'm your absent friend, and today we are going to look at main antagonists for the Final Fantasy series.
I sense deliberate concealment, sir.
Okay, not really. But we will be looking at villains from the series that, if circumstances were different, could have been the primary antagonists for their respective game. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell to be alerted when new episodes are available. We will not be looking at characters from Tactics, Legend, or the sequel games, just the main series. And as always, there will be spoilers. Master Zandi was an immortal being and a student to the great magus Noah. Just to be clear, not the Ark guy. His fellow students received the gift of great magic from their teacher, and Zandi was given the gift of mortality. So you know he got to be pissed. With the fear of death looming over him, he decides to drain the world's crystals of light and shroud everything in darkness. This would make time freeze and Zandi would not die. Simple, right? Well, not until the warriors of light step in and kill him. However, his actions unknowingly summoned the Cloud of Darkness, who wants to swallow the world in total darkness and reduce everything to nothingness. Now, it's obvious that the COD was manipulating Zandi the entire time, but I still think he would have done what he did anyway without the help of the Cloud. And of course, not the giant sword guy. This guy is the lead researcher for the Niflheim Empire. He created the Magitek technology and is responsible for all the Magitek soldiers the party encounters throughout the game. Endlessly. He experiments on everyone and everything without care of ethics or morality. He may have easily risen up to be the final boss of the game, but he got power hungry, as most villains do.
Long have I waited to smite the world that denied me the glory I rightly deserve.
Perhaps you would like to see how snake-like I can be. Another mad scientist. He works for Golbez in creating monsters out of people. One of his latest creations being Edge's royal parents. His experiments are sick and revolting, even to his villain cohorts. And right on cue, he turns himself into a mechanical being and is defeated by Cecil and company. And despite his very short-lived story arc, you can definitely tell he loved to watch people suffer. Even in his dying breath, he laughs at the fact that his weapons will wipe out all of the dwarfs of the underworld. Dwarfs? A cruel and heartless woman, she is one of Daisley's loyal subordinates. She thinks all the sea is less than human, and she has a superiority complex with just a hint of sadistic motives. I mean, she seems to get great joy from just the notion of killing a little boy in front of his own father. Later, she revels in finally capturing Lightning's group, but forgets that Final Fantasy villains love to betray their own. If she had lived, she could have easily usurped Bartandalus's power and caused a great deal of damage to both Cocoon and Pulse. Why? Just cuz. Some villains want godlike powers. Some want to destroy the world. Some want to bathe the world in nothingness. But very few just want money and political power. This is what makes President Shinra such an interesting Final Fantasy villain. He was the guy who could possibly exist in the real world. Who would have guessed in 1997 that it would be some short dude with thinning blonde hair who builds tall buildings that have his name on it? This game presented this villain with dramatic musical entrances, a carefree attitude of sucking the world of its natural resources, and he smoked a cigar while doing it. We all expected him to find his promised land, bathe in all its glory, and become the ultimate villain we all know and love. And everything was going so smoothly until... Talk about the ultimate teaser character. This powerful sorceress was the tyrannical leader of Esthar. She used her powers and influence to invoke fear and obedience in her entire country, which was massive. Unfortunately, when the story begins, she was already defeated. We only heard about her in vague recollections from NPCs and a very creepy message in television static. We do finally get to see her in all her butch glory during a flashback showing how they stopped her. And then later we do get a boss battle, but she was not at her full strength, so who knows how powerful she really is. How many Final Fantasy villains do you know that had to be sealed away in suspended animation and launched into outer space? The backstory of Garland is very long and convoluted. What? Long, convoluted backstories in a Final Fantasy game? How can this be? The Reader's Digest version is Garland was created by a race of beings called the Terrans. He was meant to find a new planet to merge with. I don't know either. And he created Kuja and Zandi to be angels of death for Gaia so the Terrans could absorb their souls. Of course, Kuja had all the makings for being the final villain, but when Garland finally appears, he destroys all of Alexandria and delivers a lot of poetic dialogue, so one could assume that he was going to be the surprise villain who will eventually become the final boss. He had all the right qualities, it just didn't happen. So this Final Fantasy game borrows many things from Star Wars. You have an Empire, the Rebels, Biggs and Wedge, and also the Emperor. He wants to rule the world by using magic. He is very conniving and ruthless in his actions. Not only does he invade countless towns throughout the world, he gives very Nazi-like speeches to invigorate his troops and claim the world and magic that is rightfully his. His list of crimes against humanity is endless, but nothing compares to him stealing a baby and killing the child's mother for no reason. If Kefka had not killed him, he definitely would have been the final boss, no question. From the moment Seymour steps off that ship, he reeks final villain qualities. He presents himself as a positive religious figure, but anyone can see he has a much more evil agenda. His ultimate goal is to marry Yuna so he can become her final summoning, then he will become the next Sin. It still baffles me to this day that he was not the final boss of that game, especially since the final boss of the game is an amoeba. This guy falls into the category of mad scientist villain. It is unknown whether he was initially insane or if his encounter with the Okura made him so. This guy was given knowledge that humans were not meant to have, so he helped create an entire power source based on nethicite. The Arcadian Empire wants this power to try and rule the world, but of course things get out of hand when Vayne wants more. Dr. Sid taunts the party throughout most of the game, and in true Star Wars tradition, turns out to be the father of one of the main party members. He should have been the final boss not only because Vayne was a terrible final boss, but also because he aspired to achieve the godlike existence that most Final Fantasy villains want. And it was the first time that Final Fantasy had ever taken their precious Sid character and turned him into such a vicious villain. Well, that's all the time we have for today. How would you rank the secondary villains of Final Fantasy? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'm your absent friend.